A rare event these days to actually have members on both sides coming together for something that makes sense, and that is, let's bring the manufacturing jobs back to the United States.
There we go. Hi, everybody. My name's Dan Merrick. I'm the co-anchor of the post-political newsletter, The Early Brief. I'm here with Congressman Michael McCaul from Texas. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's start on a broad topic, and I know this will be a question that you have near and dear to your heart. Where do you see the semiconductor industry in the scope of American industrial policy? How critical is it, and how should we view it in the future?
Well, if I could take you back when I chaired the China task force, and it was during COVID. So we were looking at supply chain, examining what are the most critical supply chains, and semiconductors, number one.
Yeah.
Two, I'd say rare earth minerals. Three would be medical, as we saw the PPEs hoarded by China after COVID. Interestingly, I know that the president seems to have forgotten that it was his administration that actually advanced this idea.
We will get there for sure.
And so semiconductors, I think, are absolutely number one key. They're in everything, our phones to our cars. And from my perspective, as both chairman of Homeland and chairman of Foreign Affairs, the most advanced weapon systems. And as we enter the AI age, which the smaller nanometer the chip is, the more you get into AI, you open the window, then you get into the advanced weapon system. So this is part of the great power competition we have with China. And if we're going to win this, we have to start manufacturing this in the United States.
You mentioned chips. You were one of the main drivers behind that bipartisan, I will say, piece of legislation that passed in 2022. How do you grade the implementation of that legislation? Has it accomplished what you had hoped? Could it have been implemented better?
I know there's criticisms about the grant program. I didn't see a lot of misuse of that, to be honest with you. I think what drove the, when I talked to, the Samsungs and the TSMCs and the Intel, Micron, it's the tax incentives. And those are permanent. And that was very hard to get through Ways and Means. They thought that refundable investment tax credit was for small startup, companies, not big companies. But I emphasize, but this is a national security issue, that we need to pull supply chain out of Taiwan, which is very vulnerable to China, and start manufacturing this, in the United States. And so I think it's just absolutely critical for the future.
So let's get to the president now. I want to read these quotes directly because during his joint address to Congress earlier this year.
And I was sitting next to Todd Young when he said this.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you what your reaction was when you heard it. But March 4th, he says to Speaker Mike Johnson to, quote, get rid of, end quote, the act, speaking of the CHIPS Act, saying, quote, your CHIPS Act is a horrible, horrible thing. We give hundreds of billions of dollars and it doesn't mean a thing, end quote. So 2 months have gone by since then. Have you spoken to the president at all about the CHIPS Act since then? And what does he get wrong about it?
Well, we've spoken to his team. And if I could go back to the genesis of the CHIPS Act, it was not even my idea. It was Secretary Mike Pompeo. It was Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, his national security team that came to me, chairing the China task force, saying, this has to be the highest priority, to incentivize manufacturing in the United States. If you think about it, in the president's theme of America First, you're talking about bringing that supply chain out of Taiwan to manufacture it in the United States. it falls directly within his philosophy. And by the way, the grant program was $52 billion, not hundreds of billions of dollars. The industry said that that would be important. The tax incentives were the most important. It passed on the National Defense Authorization that I authored during the Trump administration. And it was applauded by the Trump administration and Secretary Wilbur Ross and Pompeo. The appropriations got held up by Senator Shelby, the chair of appropriations in the Senate, unfortunately. I think he wanted something in Alabama. They horse trade a lot in the Senate, and it held it up. And then they like put it into the Biden administration. And I think somehow, in his mind, it got tainted as a Biden program, when in fact, it was his first administration that proposed the idea.
To you, do you see it as he is just reflexively against anything that happened in the 4 years between his terms?
I think so, and I think that's tainted his perception. But to answer your question, when he said this at the State of the Union, that went off script, by the way. It was not in his, his script. And we had conversations with Lutnick, and who said it's a worthwhile investment. I mean, Lutnick is very supportive. And then now they're calling it something else, the Accelerator Investments program that oversees a chip program. But essentially, it's rebranding the same program.
I mean, the president has said that tariffs would be enough to get and encourage companies to move production to the United States. Is he right about that?
When I talked to TSMC about why they doubled down on their investment, they said it was the tax incentives from the CHIPS bill that was the main driver. Now, the tariffs can play a part in terms of a carrot and stick approach. The tariff being the stick. I think TSMC saw that coming. So I'm not going to say the tariff threat didn't help facilitate the more investment in the United States, but their biggest rationale for doing that was the tax incentives. I think if tariffs are done right, the right approach, they can be effective as a stick, but I think a permanent tariff on semiconductors would have a disastrous result when it comes to Taiwan, because 90% of the advanced global manufacturing of advanced chips comes out of Taiwan, not the United States. And that would drive the cost to our consumers. And the reason we did chips is so we can get to the advanced manufacturing over time, but we're not there yet. So this would have a consequence of, the next several years of everything, all the consumer products to chips going up in price.
Former Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, and I want to read this quote directly. I know you worked closely with her on the CHIPS bill. She said, quote, "China does a CHIPS Act every month." So I know there's been talk of a CHIPS 2.0 or something like that. What do you think the chances are of a bill like that passing Congress right now with bipartisan support?
Well, right now we're trying to get the R&D design tax credit, which I had in my original CHIPS bill, and then the Senate took it out. So I'm working with Todd Young, Senator Cornyn, trying to get that back in the reconciliation piece. But to your point, China, if we're going to compete, we got to get this right. And they are subsidizing so much of their advanced chips. Now AI, thanks to NVIDIA, selling them advanced chips prior to the export control. Europe has their own chips program. I just met with the Netherlands the other day, and they were asking me how I got the chips bill passed and what worked, what didn't work. And they were very interested in their own chips program. So this is hitting Europe and Asia. They're all following the lead that the United States took, because they're seeing that the investment now is hitting, in the short term, about $600 billion and a projected $1 trillion in a couple of years. This is, it's working. We will have about 30% of the advanced semiconductor chip manufacturing in the next several years. We're not there yet.
Let's talk about China, because when I talk about the president, I think that you talk to members of Congress that there's a messaging problem with this bill when you think about the president. Is it all about framing it for him and his team as competing with China, or is it deeper than that?
Well, it's competing with China, and it's about America first. And if you want to manufacture the most important supply chain in the United States, this program has a track record of success. It worked. I think the other thing that happened, quite frankly, at the time, the Senate loaded up all these authorizations on the bill, not appropriations, which made it look more costly than it actually was. It was $52 billion in grants. The other problem was that Schumer and Manchin cut the reconciliation deal the night before the bill went from the Senate to the House. McConnell called McCarthy, told him to whip against the CHIPS bill, which had nothing to do with the Manchin conversation about reconciliation. It was more of a punitive retaliation. And so I had my whip calling me saying, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to whip against your bill. And I was stunned. Still, we got half of the chairs of the major committees, including House Intelligence and Appropriations, voting for it.
So as the Trump administration negotiates with China, can you talk about the power that they hold in this fight when it comes to critical minerals and how the U.S. should respond to that power?
Again, I think if you look at the three major supply chains, we have to incentivize. I think chips is a good model for that, but we have to start manufacturing rare earth minerals, both in the United States and with our allied nations. This is going to be a race. China controls the majority of it. The refining capacity is much greater in China than it is anywhere else in the world. And so when you talk about lithium, we talk about batteries, electric, it all comes out of China. I was in Australia. They have a lot of lithium there, but they have a port that sends the lithium to China to be refined, and then it comes back to Australia.
How much of that is a workforce issue?
I think, especially on the chip manufacturing, look, I'm blessed to have two major universities. University of Texas produces a lot of the top engineers. Texas A&M, a lot of the top engineers. So we think it's a good ecosystem for the national centers that we put in the bill to focus on advanced manufacturing. But I'll tell you, China, they work around the clock, and they have a lot of advanced degrees. This gets into an immigration debate. The H-1B visa is a high skill bill. Maybe as we get the border under control, as we're doing right now, people will be more open to this. I look back at my dad's generation. He was a bombardier, bombed the Nazis in World War II. Remember, we imported a lot of the scientists from Germany that worked on the Manhattan Project. In the universities I see, we'll have students from Asia come in to study, but they can't stay. And so we educate them at taxpayer expense, and then they go back to our competition.
So what would you do about that? Would it be as simple as inviting them to stay, or is there something about incentivizing folks who want to study come to the United States? Is it about incentivizing them to come here?
Well, the president, I had this bill several years ago. If you get a PhD in high skill in engineering, you get a green card. The president mentioned that after he met with a lot of the high-tech community. I'm not sure how others in the administration may view that now. Now, you'd have to have a proper vetting, because espionage is real. But that can be done. And then we have that talent pool that we currently have a workforce issue with.
I mean, this is something you and I were talking about backstage, is the age of manufacturing.
Yeah.
25% of manufacturing workers are 55 and older. I mean, there's really almost a tidal wave facing manufacturing when it comes to retirements and younger folks not being interested in picking up those jobs. What is the federal government's role in tackling that issue? And are you concerned about the age of manufacturing workers?
Well, yeah, when I look at the Defense Industrial Base, which is Chairman of Foreign Affairs, I sign off on all weapon systems, foreign military sales. That was a huge issue. What we found, all these mom and pop shops that create the parts that go into the weapons, were starting to retire. Now you're seeing a new wave. Like there's a company called Hadrian in Los Angeles where they have really moved forward, with very high-tech manufacturing and training people that worked at Home Depot to operate these $1 million machines. This is what you're going to start seeing more and more of. The Palantir weapon system companies, it's more small, agile weapon systems, defense contractors. So it's an issue, but it's something that I don't think we need the Defense Production Act. Like in World War II, that would be a very drastic move. If we end up in a conflict in the Indo-Pacific with China against Taiwan, then that would be a problem. I was at TSMC in Taiwan, and all the machines are ASML. It's interesting that lithography was actually developed at Lawrence Livermore Labs. Somehow the Netherlands got it, right? And now we're reliant on it. Now there are some manufacturers here in the United States that are working on advanced lithography, so we can't compete. And now China is working on this advanced lithography as well. When I look at TSMC, the founder was on track to be the CEO of Texas Instruments. So interestingly, it could have been Texas, not TSMC,
Texas, yeah.
Taiwan, but Texas,
I wanted to ask you about Texas because it has become a hub, and you've seen other states try and get into this race domestically. What do you think Texas has done right, and what lessons does it hold for other states who are looking to get into this race?
I think a friendly business climate from a tax regulatory. We are going to have to deal with the NEPA environmental issues when it comes to manufacturing of these big fab plants. So we just have a very, and the ecosystem with the universities, I think when Admiral Emmon brought DARPA into Austin, now we have the Army Futures Command in Austin and College Station. When you add all those together, it's a very good ecosystem of the universities, the military, and the private sector, very involved in innovation. And we have to unleash that innovation in the United States if we really intend to compete with China.
And Texas has been a leader on clean energy as well, clean energy development, the research there. Are you at all concerned that some of the cuts that are happening inside the Trump administration could hurt your home state and hurt that research?
There are more windmills in Texas than any other state, which is hard to believe, right?
I haven't made a TV show about the wind industry in Texas.
I'm a big fan of using tax incentives to advance good policy. Now, I like the all-of-the-above approach in energy, and I think we need to unleash, the thing that I think in terms of energy that's going to be the wave of the future, and Texas A&M at Rellis campus is developing the small modular reactors. This is going to be transformational. As you look at AI and these data centers are going to suck up a lot of energy. ERCOT, my grid system in Texas, has fallen twice.
Yeah.
It's shut down, and I don't think it's capable of sustaining the power necessary. But when you add the SMR capability, which we'll probably have in about 2 years, to provide the energy for the data centers, to me that's a perfect combination.
So I have to ask you a news of day question. The president is in the Middle East right now. You mentioned that you're a member of House Committees on Foreign Affairs, Homeland Security. I do want to ask you about this luxury plane that is being gifted to the pride.
Of course you do.
I'm sure you're shocked. I'm sure you're shocked. Do you have issues with this gift, and what is Congress's role in overseeing or oversight on this gift?
If it's government to government, that is ethically permissible. So if it's a gift to our United States military, Statue of Liberty was a gift from France. My only concern about it, well, first of all, I'd sweep it for surveillance bugs. I mean, it is Qatar.
Yeah.
The only concern I have is the optics, that it overshadowed, I think, the good work that was done between this economic alliance and partnership that I think is absolutely critical with Saudi, UAE, Qatar, because they will also be playing a lead role in the normalization process with Israel and eventually reconstructing Gaza in that conflict. But all the press is focused on is this luxury plane. And I get it. It's a low-hanging fruit.
But are you surprised by that? I mean, it's not every day that the president is gifted a $400 million.
I agree. Plane. And I think it overshadows, I think, the more the success of that trip.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have $600 billion invested in the United States in technology and AI as a result of that meeting, but no one's talking about that. They're talking about this luxury plane.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and I appreciate you ending on the news of day question and handling it so well. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.